And we are now recording. I won't be recording during the exam, of course, there's nothing to record. But I'll lecture a little bit, as I said I would. Okay, so we are here. So I'm going to do some of 9.2, and then second hour or second half, which might be more than an hour, we'll be taking our exam. Okay, I won't finish 9.2, so I'm over here 9.2. So I've already pushed back maybe 2 days, but again, we have all these extra days at the end. So I think time-wise, we're still going to be okay. All right, so I'll begin with the formal lecture. Okay. All right, so for this section, there's all these other formulas that you'll be putting on your next cheat sheet, not for today's test, of course. So I mentioned these to you yesterday, double angle formulas. Where are we? Page 611. If you want to put this on your next cheat sheet, sine of 2 theta equals 2 sine theta cosine theta. Cosine 2 theta is cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta. Tangent 2 theta equals 2 tangent theta divided by 1 minus tangent squared theta. And again, the formulas go both ways. Be ready to go from right to left or from left to right. There are more formulas. Okay, so on page 613, okay, there are equivalent forms of cosine 2 theta equals cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta. Now, since cosine squared theta itself is equal to 1 minus sine squared theta, you could make that 1 minus sine squared theta minus another sine squared theta, and then you get that formula. Okay. You could change sine squared theta to parentheses 1 minus cosine squared theta, and you get that formula. Okay. You can solve this for cosine squared theta. It looks like that. Cosine squared theta equals 1 plus cosine 2 theta over 2. You can solve this for sine squared theta. It will look like this, 1 minus cosine 2 theta over 2. Okay, so here are 4 more formulas. Okay, these are sometimes called double angle or half angle formulas. Okay, where this angle is twice that, or you can say this angle is half of that. Okay. So equivalent forms of 3 and 4 show up over here. Okay, so on page 614, half angle formulas, sine of s over 2 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine s over 2. Number 2, cosine of s over 2 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine s over 2. You know, how did you get that? You basically just take the square root of equations 3 and 4. Okay, this angle is half that. So they said s over 2 here, s here, s over 2 here, s here. Do the square root. Now, when you do a square root, you have to consider plus or minus. So you have to figure out what quadrant you're in, again, to determine whether you have a positive or negative. And then we have a formula for tangent of s over 2. Okay, so if you do some algebra the right way, I won't bother showing it to you, but you get this sine s over 1 plus cosine s. In fact, there's even more than one way to put that, but we'll just leave it with that one. Okay, so I'll do some of the homework problems. I won't get that far. You won't need to. Okay, so 9.2, 1 to 51 odd. I'll go ahead and show that to you again. There's 1, there's 3. Okay, or I guess 3 and 5. I'm not sure I showed you 5. Yeah, there we go. Book might be a little bit crooked. 7, 9, 11. There's that. There's all of that. All that. All that. We're definitely going to slow down on some of this stuff because it just takes a while to do a lot of these. And then some more identities. Okay, and you know the way identities work, right? You draw a line past the equal sign. And there we go. Okay. All right, so number 1. The cosine of phi is 7 over 25. If you give me this information, I might give you something like that in a test also. What quadrant am I in? quadrant 1, best case scenario, right? Everything's positive. Quadrant 1. So I need sine of phi. This is, I'll call that Greek letter phi, or sometimes phi. Sine squared phi plus cosine squared phi equals 1. Sine squared phi plus 7/25 squared equals 1. 7/25 squared is 49/625. Sine squared phi plus 49/625 equals 1. There's 1. Subtract 49/625. Sine squared phi is 576/625. Take the square root. We're in quadrant 1, so I want the positive. So sine of phi is 24/25. Okay, and again, I'll raise it up. All right, so sine of phi, cosine phi. Now, what do they want? Sine of 2 phi by formula is 2 sine phi cosine phi. So 2 times 24/25 times cosine phi is 7/25. So whatever that comes out to be. (336/625). Cosine 2 phi by formula is cosine squared phi minus sine squared phi. So cosine squared, 7/25 squared, minus sine squared, 24/25 squared. So that's 49/625 minus 576/625. 49 minus 576, negative 527/625. And then tangent 2 phi, it's sine of 2 phi divided by cosine 2 phi. That's easier than using the double angle formula in this case. So sine of 2 phi was this thing, 336/625 divided by negative 527/625. We know the 625s cancel out, so negative 336/527. And that's it for that one. Okay. Okay, how about I do number 3? Tangent of u is negative 4. What quadrant are we in? Between 3π/2 and 2π, that's quadrant 4. So let me use 1 plus tangent squared u is secant squared u. 1 plus negative 4 squared equals secant squared u. That's 1 plus 16 is 17 equals secant squared u. I'm in quadrant 4. All students take calculus. Cosine is positive. So secant u is radical 17, which means cosine is 1 over radical 17. Okay, and find sine of u. I could use sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1, but since I already know I have tangent and cosine, that's probably easier. So tangent of u is sine u over cosine u. Multiply both sides by cosine u. Sine u is tan u cosine u. Tan u was -4. Cosine was 1 over radical 17, so -4 over radical 17. Okay, sine of u, cosine of u. All right, now I just do the same thing. Sine of 2u, by formula, that's 2 sine u cosine u. 2 times sine of u is that, -4 over radical 17. Cosine of u is 1 over radical 17. So that comes out to be -8 over 17. The cosine 2u, by formula, cosine squared u minus sine squared of u. So I square that, 1 over radical 17 squared, minus I square that, -8 over, oops, sorry, -4 over radical 17 squared, 1 over 17 minus 16 over 17, -15 over 17. And tangent 2u is sine of 2u divided by cosine of 2u. Sine of 2u, we just did that, -8 over 17. Cosine of 2u, -15 over 17. 17s cancel out, 2 negatives make a positive, 8 over 15. Okay. All right, then show you maybe number 9. Sine of theta is 3/4. And what quadrant are we in? Quadrant 2, between pi over 2 and pi. I'm only going to do A and B, the double angles. I'll save the half angle formulas for Monday. Okay, so 9A and 9B. So 9. Sine of theta is 3/4. I'm in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2, all students take calculus. Sine is positive, cosine will be negative. All right, sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. Sine of theta is 3/4. 3/4 squared plus cosine squared theta equals 1. 3/4 squared is 9 over 16, plus cosine squared theta is equal to 1. 1 is 16 over 16. Subtract 9/16. Cosine squared theta is 7 over 16. Square root, square root. This time I want a negative because I'm in quadrant 2. So cosine theta is negative radical 7 over 4. All right. So A, as for the sine of 2 theta, by formula, 2 sine theta cosine theta. 2 sine of theta was 3/4. Cosine theta is negative radical 7 over 4. And so let's see, 4 times 4 is 16. Cancel the 2 gives me an 8 on the bottom. So negative 3 radical 7 over 8. Okay, 2 on top, 16 on the bottom. Cancel, you get 8. Cosine 2 theta by formula is cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta. So cosine squared, I square that. Negative radical 7 over 4 squared minus sine of theta squared. They gave me that as 3/4. So that's 7 over 16 minus 9 over 16 is negative 2 over 16 or negative 1/8. And that's pretty much it for that type of problem. Okay, so again, I'm going to hold off on the double angle formulas until Monday. So stuff like 5, I'll wait. And even this particular problem that I did, there's a part C and D. C and D have half angles. I'll save that for next time. Okay, 1125 went very quickly. Okay, what if they gave me a triangle? That should not be that big a deal. Okay, so how about I'll show you, say 17. Okay, sine of 2 theta, cosine 2 theta, tangent 2 theta. Go from there. Okay. So 17. Three, 4, 5, theta, beta. All right, so for 17, it asks for sine, cosine, and tangent. 17, sine, cosine, and tangent of 2 theta. So let's figure out for theta. Sine of theta, you should know this for today's test, opposite over hypotenuse, 3/5. Cosine of theta, adjacent of hypotenuse, 4/5. And here we go, do the same stuff. Sine of 2 theta is 2 sine theta cosine theta. So 2 times 3/5 times 4/5. Multiply that out. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 4 is 24. 24 over 25. Cosine 2 theta by formula. Cosine squared theta minus sine squared theta. So I square this. 4/5 squared minus the square of the sine of theta. 3/5 squared. That's 16 over 25 minus 9 over 25, which is 7 over 25. And finally, tangent 2 theta, and I'm stopping after this one. So if you have any questions, I'll ask them shortly after I finish this and then do the focusing thing. So sine of 2 theta divided by cosine 2 theta. So sine of 2 theta, 24 over 25, divided by 7 over 25. 25's drop out. 24 over 7. Okay, and it's almost 11:30, so that's as much of the lecture I was going to do for today. Okay, so again, I'm going to continue with section 9.2 on Monday. I haven't finished it by any means. Got a lot more to do. I have Monday reserved for that. That should be fine. Okay, so let me do my focusing thing. And if anybody has any questions, you can start typing in the chat now, even now, if you have any questions about anything. So let me do my focus stuff. There's all that. So again, while I'm showing you this, I'll be done in a few seconds. So you can ask questions from now until 12, but if you don't have any questions, we can just break early and start the test early. This. Hmm, 17. And that pretty much does it. Okay. All right, so I'm finished with lecture. I'll take questions if you have any. I don't see anything in the chat yet. So I'll wait a few moments for anything in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves. So any questions, please? Wait just a little longer. Okay, I don't see or hear anything, so I will assume that we're not taking any questions. All right, so it's about 11:30ish. We will quote unquote break until 11:40. I'm going to stop recording.